This video is rated B for you'd better back on out of here if you don't want spoilers, buddy. Reapers, Reapers, Reapers. In the future, we will have so much to discuss, and I look forward to that day. Because thanks to dungeons like Lapis Manalis, we're given more history about certain jobs and lore that otherwise might not have been present. Let's talk about that. Good day everyone, I am the Synodic Scribe, your favorite researcher, and I'm currently trying to make sure that these caves do not explode and destroy all the valuable history here. So unfortunately, this isn't going to be one of my usual dungeon delving videos where I go over the history of a dungeon and why it's more deep than you'd understand at first glance. No, today I want to talk about why introducing something as minor as this always gets me excited to make future videos for this MMO. Now, to the usual player, this dungeon isn't going to be much of anything special. It's likely going to be played repeatedly in their expert roulette over and over to the point that they're sick of seeing it. But for others, it will only take a single run through to appreciate the minor details and lore being scattered throughout this place. I always enjoy running through dungeons like this no matter how many roulettes I need, because I'm always reminded just how much world building can be stuffed into a small enough space when you really want to. So let's get into why that's the case here and how expanding on the lore of jobs doesn't need to end at the job quests. Let's address the dungeon itself. This place should feel like a home to any of you Reaper mains watching this video, as this location is where many Reapers throughout Garlean history have lived, trained, and passed on their teachings to others. For lack of a better term, this was a Reaper hub, a town designed specifically by them for the sole purpose of refining their craft and keeping their arts safe from prying eyes. If I'm being completely honest, while I was walking through this place, I was getting intense Sheikah vibes. Despite The Legend of Zelda being a completely different franchise, both the Reapers who lived here and the Sheikah of that universe already shared many similarities. They're both secretive, shadowy organizations. They both lived in places hidden away from their country of origin. They both trained people about the art of espionage. And both aren't afraid to get their hands dirty for what they see as the greater good. I personally loved these similarities, but that might just be my inner Zelda fan trying to poke his head out before I stuff him back into his hole. But speaking of holes, this entire mountain is sitting on an absolutely massive deposit of combustible ceruleum, so don't you dare think about feeling safe. The fumes alone will choke you. Though getting back on track, this dungeon did an amazing job by expanding on the lore of Reapers without having to dedicate time to something like a job quest. I understand that to many players, it's upsetting that we don't really see job quests anymore, and as someone who's always eager to learn more about my favorite jobs, I empathize. But if we look past the job quests, we should be asking ourselves how unique places like Lapis Manalis are able to tell us more about the jobs without tons of storytelling. For example, I can assert with confidence that this town of Reapers was entirely self-sufficient. They more than likely found ways to operate with minimal contact with the outside, only pulling resources from Garlemald when absolutely necessary. But how do I know this? None of the notes in the dungeon addressed it. This assertion comes from the design of the dungeon itself. And props to any of my fellow explorers who noticed these details. Within the caves of Lapis Manalis, you're able to see crop rows. This seemingly worthless data informs us that they were growing their own food. And the wildlife you see outside during the first boss encounter tells us that there was game to hunt as well. That, combined with the meltable snow and natural water found in these caves, meant that they wouldn't go thirsty either. In addition, these caves and buildings would have made for an amazing shelter against northern Ilsabard's more dramatic weather patterns. So with needs like food and shelter being taken care of, the people living here were able to focus solely on their craft. I'll save the greater details of this dungeon for another video, but know that from the very design of this town, the second boss, and a few scattered notes, we now know more about the culture of Reapers than the job quest ever elaborated on. We know they had different tiers of training and mastery. We know they had a way of making automatons that was lost to them. And we know that this place was perfect for making contracts with avatars, as the veil between here and the 13th is surprisingly thin. And that's the reason why I'm drawing so much attention to this dungeon, because I always felt like we needed more places like this in Final Fantasy XIV. Places of historical importance that reveal the truth behind why some of our favorite jobs and abilities are just as powerful and refined as they are. Now, not all jobs would have a hub like this due to their nature. The Gunbreakers are a good example because any kind of hub or training ground they once had was likely blown up with the rest of Eorzea. But then again, we've already seen other places like this throughout our time in the game. The monks still have their ancestral training ground with the Temple of the Fist. The dancers have their ancient stage. And the machinists have their Skysteel manufactory, just to name a few. In fact, I remember how excited I was back in Heavensward halfway through the Paladin quest chain. I thought for sure we were going to see the creation of a brand new order of free paladins. Paladins that would have likely created or claimed a castle from which to build their ranks and train new initiates. Of course, that didn't happen, and the Paladin quest chain fell apart like wet bread, but you probably get what I mean. These would have been gathering places for the jobs that we play in order to tell us more about the jobs themselves without having to dedicate too much time to an intricate quest story. For example, I always wondered how cool would it be for people who main monk to go back to the Temple of the Fist to train or practice with other monk mains, with scrolls in some hallways that explain minor facts about the job. How interesting would it be for red mages to have a crimson tower to gather around in Girabania? What if the scholars began to rebuild a part of Nim so that they might breathe new life into their nearly extinct spell school? This is why I love locations like Lapis Manalis. Not only do I get to learn so much more about the job this place is connected to, but it fills my mind with thoughts and ideas of what else we could see in the future should the developers ever truly feel like it. Now, I understand that to some, the idea of a job hub is a pointless thought, and honestly, I'd have to agree with those people. There would be little point to making a job hub with practice dummies, as most players would likely just keep going to the same practice fields that they already use. In addition, if you're not interested in lore, then it doesn't matter how many books or notes these hubs have. You're not going to read them, much less care what they have to say. And since the job system within Final Fantasy XIV is much more shallow than it looks, most conversations between players would end up looking like this. Hey, you doing your positionals? Yeah. Are you learning mechanics? Mm-hmm. Making sure your uptime is good? Yup. Eating food and drinking pots? Oh yeah. Cool. Yeah. So, gold saucer then? Sure. Now, is job mastery in Final Fantasy XIV more involved than that? Yeah, it is. But that's usually more because of the player than the job. So while the idea of hubs like this would be more of a lore fan's dream, I understand why they don't exist. That's why I'm more content to enjoy the dungeons like the Temple of Fist or Lapis Manalis. In fact, I hope we see more dungeons like these that gently touch on job information and give us a reason to love our favorite jobs that much more. But that will be all from me for now. I just wanted to get it out there that yes, I did see all of the awesome Reaper lore, and I can't wait to cover the job at a later date. Not only that, but Lapis Manalis has me excited as ever to hopefully see more job lore in the future, even if it's not what people are expecting to see. So, as always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you during my next lesson. Until then, stay safe, my friends. Thank you all for watching to the end. If you enjoyed this video, why not subscribe and share this with your fellow adventurers? With your help, I'll try to reach out even further and bring even greater stories to you. Although, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my biggest contributors. A grand thank you to Papaya Cyan, Rovakis, Potato, The Yellow Couch, Sage Mouse, Vavalisoma, Sizani, Tyradox, and Net, with an additional nod to the scholarships on screen. Links to things like my Twitter and that of my channel artist Caddy can be found in the description. Thank you all for your viewership as well as your support, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Class dismissed.